Well, we'd like to continue the forum now with the candidates for the Select Board. We have two candidates running for one position. It's a 3-year term. And the first candidate is Laura Gregory. She's from 5 Embassy Lane, and Laura is the incumbent. And the other candidate is Kevin Coffey from 1 Stafford Lane. And once again, if you don't mind me referring you to as Laura and Kevin, that'll make it
That's fine.
a little simpler, okay? All right, we're going to follow the same format that we followed for the moderators. Each candidate will make up to a 2-minute opening statement, followed by questions that were pre-prepared that came from the community. Each candidate will have a 2-minute time frame to answer those questions, and then each candidate will be allowed to make a 1-minute response or rebuttal if that's the case. And then we will open it for questions from the audience, and after those questions have been answered, each candidate will be allowed to make a closing statement. Okay? We good? All right, so with that, let's turn to the questions, and I believe, the opening statements. I believe, Laura, you're on first.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank the Service Club and Brad for hosting tonight's debate.
You're welcome.
I first ran for the Select Board in 2017 to refocus the board back to doing the business of the town and representing the needs of all Andover residents. We're in a much better place today, and I'm proud of what I've helped accomplish on behalf of Andover residents. During my tenure, I've supported facility upgrades, including the Ballard Vale Fire Station, the Municipal Services Building that we're in this evening. Oh, no, the Municipal Services Building on Campanelli, the Robb Center, West Elementary, and Shawsheen. I have enabled responsible development, advanced sustainability projects, developed policy to make our community more inclusive, and critically important, improve financial health through funding of long-term liabilities, saving taxpayers nearly $150 million between now and 2040. And we have done this without an increase in headcount or full-time employees, and keeping the increase in the residential tax bills within the 10-year average. I've also addressed 2 significant crises, the gas explosions and the pandemic, chairing the board for the first 6 months of the pandemic. I bring 6 years on the Select Board as well as 30 years as a practicing civil litigation attorney to the position. I've used my legal expertise in negotiating the North Reading 99-year water agreement and currently negotiating with the developers of the downtown Old Town Yard. I also bring my experience as a zoning board member and a parent active in Andover schools. My zoning experience will be useful as we navigate the new law requiring zoning for higher residential density near one or both of our 2 MBTA commuter rail stations. Balance is important, and making good decisions for Andover's future requires weighing a wide range of needs. If re-elected to the Select Board, I will continue my involvement in finalizing the sale and development of our Old Town Yard property and ensuring that it benefits our community and downtown. I will continue my support of green space, recreation, education, sustainability, local businesses, and DEI, as well as ensuring that Andover continues to review its needs and look for efficiencies as we evolve.
Thank you. Kevin, opening statement.
Thank you, and thanks for putting the event on.
You're welcome.
I'm asking for your confidence and vote for me to join the Select Board because we're in a very different situation now than we were 3 or 6 years ago. And I'll bring a different skill set and approach that's needed to tackle the challenges that we face now. The decade before COVID was pretty easy from a financial view, everything up and to the right, strong markets, low interest rates, and so on. And now we have significant external economy concerns, higher interest rates, business caution, even bank failures we read about now, and at the same time increasing demands and expectations on our town. And rapidly rising property taxes, which I'm sure we'll come back to, and I have the numbers here, and we're not within a 10-year average, which I'm happy to come back to. We need to slow the growth in property taxes. So it's now time to be more cautious in our spending, our debt commitments, and our hiring, back off the accelerator a little bit, be a little more conservative, concentrate our investments on the highest priority needs, and ensure we get solid results for those. More constructive tension in our planning and spending, better forecast visibility and planning, and smart development can keep us out of debt trouble while keeping Andover nice and tax increases manageable. We need to remain financially sustainable. Immediately facing us are big questions: how to modernize our high school for the next generation of students, how to address state demand that we authorize building more than 2,000 new high-density housing units near our commuter rail stations, how we choose to develop other town property, like the park property on Chandler Road as an example. My training and professional leadership experience prepare me to ask tough questions and challenge assumptions in a professional and constructive way, to build consensus and teamwork through open, proactive communication with residents and across departments, and to help position Andover more sustainably for the years ahead.
Thank you. Laura, you're up first on our 6 of our prepared questions. What do you see as the challenges facing the town, and what solutions do you propose?
Well, there are no easy solutions. So
I didn't ask that.
In 2 minutes, I can tell you I'm not going to be able to give solutions. But I think the 2 biggest things that we're facing right now are as Kevin mentioned, and I mentioned as well, the MBTA zoning. And it is just zoning. It doesn't require the building, but it does require that we set up the zoning, or we lose funding, or the Attorney General has stated that she will sue communities that do not comply with it. So we have a lot to learn. The state is providing additional guidance as we go forward, and that's something the community is going to have to decide. It's a zoning article. It's going to require a 2/3 vote at town meeting. So the select board will be in a position to provide information, to make sure that there are ways to options to look at and things like that, and also to address what we'll lose if we don't do it. The second thing is Andover High School. And we've been looking at Andover High School since 2016. My 2 daughters both went through there. I was the president of the PAC before I got elected. And I'm very aware of the problems that are there, and they're not getting better. There are hard choices. We've looked at it since 2016. I think it's time to bring it to a town meeting vote and see what the community wants to do. If we're going to do it, we're going to require not only a town meeting vote, but also a ballot box vote. So if the community doesn't want it, then we'll have to figure out the expenses for maintaining the building going forward, because that's going to be a very significant expense as well. And replacement in the future is only going to be more expensive than it is now. So these are hard decisions, and they're decisions that our community needs to make, and we need to make sure that they're informed, and we're in that process now. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
It's okay, Brad, thank you. I think the biggest challenge we face is attempting to do all the things we must do and would like to do within some acceptable financial envelope. Watching our property taxes increase 4, 5, or 6% a year in a compounded way, I don't believe to be sustainable. I think that prices seniors out of town. It doesn't make for certainly not low, but even modest income housing available, and it's something we just have to dial back to a different level. Absolutely, Andover has always valued education. We will continue to do so. The high school needs some investment. There's no question about that. Whether the project as proposed thus far is the one that fits with the town will ultimately be decided at town meeting in the ballot box, as it should be. It is disappointing that there's been no cost planning or expectation setting for the citizenry thus far. So balancing what we will want to do and need to do in education, how to support how many of the other very nice town services and programs and facilities that we have, and how to do that within some acceptable financial trajectory is the challenge I believe we're going to wrestle with here in the years ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. Laura, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'd just like to mention that the high school building committee is going to be receiving some high-level numbers, and my understanding is they're coming in next week to have complete numbers and also tax projections. So we will have information very soon. But it's clearly a big project, no matter how you slice it. But additionally, on the warrant this year for town meeting, we're looking at spending I believe it's about $200,000 for a connection to the boiler for when the boiler has a failure, so that we can connect a outside boiler to keep Andover High from freezing up. So that's just one example. In a few years, we'll have to spend several $1 million to replace the boilers at the high school, and that's not an if, it's a when. So it's it's not free to just keep using it either, and we need to make sure that everyone understands all of those costs.
Kevin, would you like to comment?
As I said, there needs to be investment in the high school. There's no question about that. It can't continue without some problems being addressed and without better preparing it for the needs ahead. The issue isn't, do we need to do something? It's what's the responsible thing to do. We don't have numbers on the table yet. I look forward to seeing them. I think many people do, and figuring out how and if we can fit them in.
Thank you. Kevin, you'll be up next on the second of our prepared questions. As a matter of policy, do you believe that the Select Board, acting as fiduciaries of the town, should prioritize maximizing tax revenues to fund town programs, or prioritize the affordability of living in Andover for its lower income, middle income, and elderly citizens?
Thank you. It's a bit of a troubling question, I would say, because these things are not black and white. I don't know that you choose one or the other. I don't think it is the mission of the Select Board to seek to purely maximize tax income. So I guess I'd say no to the first one. The responsibility of the Select Board is to match what the town's doing to the residents' expectations in terms of policy set for the town manager, ultimately appointment of the town manager, negotiation of a budget, and so on. The Select Board's responsibility is to ensure that is aligned to the expectations of the community, not necessarily to drive any particular individual agenda on that. Certainly affordable housing, a range of affordable housing, is a very important topic. One of the things I've loved about Andover is it has been quite a mixed and diverse community. We know of others in the state that are not. I wouldn't choose to live there, and I hope we can maintain Andover as somewhere that's affordable and accessible for a wide range of people, incomes, means, outlooks, et cetera.
Okay. Laura, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
In my mind, the Select Board cannot do either of those things as a priority. Being on the Select Board is all about balancing many, many interests and many desires, not all of which we can afford or would even be practical. So we need to obviously look at both ends of that spectrum and make sure that we're addressing to the best that we can within the parameters of the law, revenue, and the stakeholders involved, both ends of that. One example would be that we have town meeting passed a means-tested senior tax credit, and each year it's up to the Select Board to determine the amount of that, up to 100% of the amount that the state determines. And that was passed by town meeting, and each year the Select Board has voted 100% for that. There are limited ways that we can support these things, but they're important to do. But also, our residents expect a high level of services from Andover, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can within the revenues that we can to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Kevin, would you like to comment?
I think our spending and our debt taking is growing too fast, and it's not sustainable. So yes, it's about balancing wants and needs. As I say, it's a responsibility of the Select Board to be sure we've got the will of our entire town matched and meshed to the directives and priorities as the town manager would bring together the budget.
Thank you. Laura, I believe you're up next for our third question. If past voting patterns are any indication, there is an apathy in Andover towards town government. Why do you think this is, and how would you work to get more residents involved?
We saw an increase in involvement of residents during the pandemic when things were online and a lot of people didn't have too much to do, and it was really great. And as much as some of us by the end of the pandemic were tired of Zoom, it was a great mechanism to include people and we were able to get a lot of volunteers. A lot of that has continued. Some of it has dropped off as we've gotten, out of our homes and away from our screens a little bit more. But my hope is that it isn't apathy, it's contentment, that generally people who are unhappy with how things are operating will let you know, will make their voice heard in some manner, whether that's attending a select board meeting or sending an email or, you know, cornering you in the grocery store, whatever it may be. And I've, you know, over my 6 years received all three of those methods of information from people. So I think there are always ways to get more people involved, and we need to do our best to get more information out. We've hired a new communications person. We're getting more information out over social media. We're trying to adjust to the fact that our longtime town newspaper is not providing as much information to our community as it has in the past, and that there are opportunities for people to get active. One example is the last 2 years, the select board races were not contested, and this year it is, and I thank Kevin for running. These are important positions, and it's good that we have people that are involved and willing to put themselves out there, because the campaign and the debates are not easy.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
No, it's just fine, Brad. Why apathy, I guess, is the question.
And how to get more people involved.
Right. You know, running a campaign for the first time ever for anything, I've met hundreds and hundreds of people in this town in the past weeks, which has been unbelievably rewarding to find out how many really great people that how I've never met them in 27 years here, I don't know, but it's been really rewarding to do that. And the sense that I've got from them is not necessarily one of contentment. It's more one of frustration. Everyone acknowledges that there are many, many wonderful things in Andover, and I guess many people would have moved if they didn't feel that way. But there's a lot of frustration. I think why the apathy? I think people don't feel heard. They don't feel that they can make a difference. They don't feel like they can understand and navigate the ocean of information that's available. And I think the mechanics, which really came up in the moderator discussion, is town meeting workable? Is it a vehicle that in modern times really allows people to get involved? Remains a question. There are wonderful benefits of that. It still just needs to be thought about. What would I do? I think it's a lot of proactive reach out. It's really trying to go to people, meet them where they are, ask questions openly, listen, make them feel heard. It's real transparency. A 200-page budget book, a 100-page FinCom report, and God knows how many hours of meeting video is not transparent, really, because nobody can absorb that. I think there need to be clear summaries. People need to be well-informed in a way they can absorb, and that they really can express their decisions. So it's being accessible, being proactive, being open, and being transparent in a genuine, workable way.
Thank you. Laura, would you like to comment?
I'd just like to add two things. One, the new Bartlett Dispatch, I believe it's called, the newsletter, is talking, for example, provides a summary of information at select board meetings. Additionally, with regard to like the FinCom book and the budget book, or also the capital improvement plan, these are all things where there are programs where additional information is provided, where people can ask questions. We have done a forum in advance of town meeting in the past, and we're going to ramp that up more based on the Government Study Committee's recommendations. Some of the problem is it's difficult for people to find the time in their day. And yes, I agree with you, there's a lot of information out there, and we're trying with the new communications person to make it as easily accessible as we can, and I'm sure there are improvements that we'll be continuing to make.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to comment?
Sure. I started my career as a marketing guy, which is all about communicating with people. And understanding their expectations and getting them information in a way that they can absorb and act on. And it's been a long time since I've done a marketing job, but those principles were baked into me. And it is reach out, it's understanding where people are, and it's offering information and options in a way that's meaningful for them. And we need a lot more of that than what we have in town today.
Thank you. Kevin, you're up next. This is our fourth question. be prepared. There have been discussions of changing Columbus Day, which is a national holiday, to Indigenous Peoples' Day. Is this something you support, and is this something that the Select Board has within their authority to declare?
I don't see that that's a good decision for the Select Board to make. I think at the end of the day, that's something that should be brought to the townspeople broadly, and if it's important to a majority of the town, I'm plenty happy to live within the will of that. To be honest, I don't feel compelled to defend what's there, and I'm not resistant to change either one. I understand both perspectives. I guess we know that atrocities were committed by conquering people, if you like. There's no question about that aspect of the history. But I think we ought not whitewash that and take it away either. We have to acknowledge what was achieved, and we have to acknowledge at the same time some of the horrific acts that were part of that. So I guess I'm not one to try to revise the way history is told, but to acknowledge the good and the bad within that. And if a name change is important symbolically to the most of the town, I'm also fine with changing it. And if not, that's okay. But I don't see that 5 people ought to decide what a holiday is. And it also is a little strange to me for a town to be naming a holiday when there are also state and federal standards for that. So I just don't know how it would be if different holidays start to be called different things. I am pleased to know that there's in discussion, I think even at a national level, certainly at a state, a creation of an Indigenous Peoples' Day to recognize those, and I'm wholeheartedly for that.
Okay. Laura, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I am the liaison to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission in town, and the DEI Commission submitted a request to the Select Board to address this issue. We have not yet had a discussion of it on the merits. The request from the Commission also talked about engaging with the community, getting feedback, getting information. My understanding is that next week on the Select Board agenda that we will be looking at a time frame for beginning that discussion. Assuming that we get that started and with some agreement of a time frame on Monday, we can see where it goes. We do have a full agenda with a number of warrant articles, so it's possible it may get pushed off, but that's my understanding that the chair is anticipating having that on Monday, so I look forward to figuring out a process for moving forward.
Okay. Kevin, do you have anything, a comment you'd like to add? You good?
I think we've covered it.
Laura, you good?
I'm good.
All right. Laura, you're up first on the next question, and we've already touched on this, or one of you have, but I think it deserves some specifics. The state requires MBTA communities to implement at least one multifamily zone district near transit stations. If municipalities do not comply, they risk losing state funding. Due to the existing housing numbers in Andover, the new zoning district would allow 2,031 new family units. There are 2 stations in Andover, one downtown and one in Ballardville. Do you support building these units, and if so, where should they be located?
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the law does not require that the units be built. It only requires that a zoning be passed that allows for multifamily housing with a greater density. And there seems to be some confusion from having been to a couple of things that have discussed this, that having the zone does not require anything to be done. If there's a single-family house that is within that zone, they don't need to make any changes. So I think it's unlikely we'd actually have built the maximum number, but it's an important thing to understand. We have a lot of questions right now because the way that the acreage is determined, for example, there's a requirement that it be contiguous, and that contiguousness does not go across rivers, for example. we have the Shawshene River that goes pretty much along both of ours. So that's something that we need to figure out how this would actually work. What would be the options? We need more information to do that from the state, and then we need to figure out what the options might be, because making a decision based on not enough information isn't going to be good for Andover and isn't something that we want to do. Another thing to keep in mind is that we could do it at one or other or both to meet the requirement. And one thing that I found interesting from our consultant was that because we have a established historic commission in Ballardvale that has various controls on what is built there, that would continue and would still, that process would still need to be gone through even if the zoning, even for building within this type of zoning.
Okay.
So that's something to keep in mind as well. A lot of moving parts, and this is something that the community really needs to understand, and we need to make some decisions, but we've got about a year and a half to do it. And so I look forward to the journey, and we'll see where we end up.
Kevin, would you like me to repeat the statement in question, or are you good?
It's fine, that's fine. I've attended some of those meetings as well, and I think, yes, there's the technicalities of the law, that the law really says you have to establish this kind of zoning, but the intent is clear. The intent is to build more dense, lower-income housing, and we ought not dodge that by saying, oh, we're going to zone things and we're going to assume nothing's ever going to get built. I think that's disingenuous. We ought to tackle the real intent and the real topic here, which is for more and less expensive housing closer to transit. And to the extent that overlaps with the law, that's great. I understand the zoning district. I think there are things that could be done different places in town. We've started already with the Old Town Yard, the Historic Mill District as it's called, and it might be that we could make that zoning by right, and it already allows for greater density than is even required in the state law. So there might be things we can adjust and be compliant or largely compliant. There are also some opportunities to think out of the box, I think. We have an abandoned train station up on Haverhill Street that hasn't worked for quite some time, but if that worked again, there's an enormous building and an enormous amount of parking there that in theory could be zoned to be redeveloped and provide an awful lot of housing about 20 steps from a train station almost. And down, if we go south near Pfizer and Gillette Way and stuff, there could be a possibility to put a new train station. I don't suggest the MBTA is going to be in a hurry to do that, but there is an area where there's space for development. The train tracks already run right through there. There are employers there. So I think there's a set of options, but at the end of the day, this is about being really full and transparent with the community, getting some clear examples out there that people can react to and not get tangled in legalese and come to a community decision.
Thank you, Kevin. Laura, would you like to comment?
I guess I'd just like to say that I'm not suggesting that that the housing would never be built. What I am suggesting is it's unlikely that it would all be built, and that certainly wouldn't be something that would happen soon. We're looking at making a zoning change, and yes, the idea is to create more housing in the Commonwealth. We have people that are leaving the state, and we have expensive housing. So that is certainly what the goal of this is. And generally, I'm in favor of that. However, we have to look at the pluses and minuses for how that would work in our community and how our residents feel about it. Ultimately, again, it's going to be town meeting that's going to decide, and I want town meeting to be informed. I want to be informed before making any decision for myself or anyone else. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kevin, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think we need whole plans here, right? It's easy to say we just need more housing or we don't, and people react at that top level. But what's not there yet, and I've asked Paul if the planning department could help us there, kind of some whole plans or example plans to react to that explain not only what it physically could look like in different settings, but also what would it mean for traffic, for school and other impacts in the town, public safety. You don't just put 2,000 or even 500 extra housing units in and not have implications along a lot of other dimensions. So I think those need to be illustrated in a more concrete way than legalese so that all of us can better understand and react and ultimately, yes, decide at town meeting.
Okay, thank you. This is the last of our pre-prepared questions. A recent analysis of the cost to build a new high school was $430 million. This will cost the average single-family property tax bill by $1,768 for the next 30 years. The state prohibits towns from taking on debt greater than 5% of its cash value. The town's current debt limit is $510 million, with approximately $409 million in available debt capacity. Andover would likely need to get an exemption from state rules on municipal debt to build a new high school without the Massachusetts School Building Authority helping pick up the tab. Some have suggested student populations are declining, and Andover does not need a school of the size being proposed. Question: do you favor applying for the exemption from the state to raise the debt limit? And if so, do you feel comfortable allocating all of that debt to building a new school? If you are not in favor, what do you propose?
Who does that
You're
question
up.
go to first?
You're up.
Me, thank you. I am not in favor of trying to increase our debt limit. We've seen that happen time and again at the federal level, and I don't see that it's leading anywhere good. That's a guardrail that's there for a reason. It's not unlike an individual credit card limit, and living at that limit it just never is a good place. At the end, it has to be paid off, and when you run close to that limit, you have no cushion for when you do have an emergency. Not very long ago, we had to put more than $1 million into the facade on the Collins Center for problems that are there. Things come up that are not predictable. It could be the boiler at the high school. It could be anything, and we need to have some cushion and some squish to accommodate those. And if we've got our credit card maxed, that is not a good place to be. So I suggest that's a guardrail that's there for prudent reasons. We ought to observe it. We ought to ask ourselves, what can we afford? We should ask ourselves, what trade-offs could we make? Where could we save money in our operating budget to fund some of that without additional debt? But no, in summary, I am not in favor of asking for our debt limit to be raised.
Laura, would you like me to repeat the statement in question,
No.
or are you good?
So my understanding is this is a extremely unusual situation. In fact, at the topping off ceremony at West Elementary, the director of the MSBA was there, and he was shocked to find out that this existed. And the reason it's happening is because essentially no one has moved forward with a school without the MSBA, and the costs have increased over time, and a variety of reasons. So I know that the town manager and the state delegation are looking at different possibilities on how to address it. Ultimately, it's going to be something that the community is going to have to support. Sheila spoke about the debt tolerance of the community. And that's why on these big projects, not only do you have to have a vote at town meeting, you also have to have it at the ballot box. And yes, I would like to have more people participate at town meeting, and I would like to have more people vote in all types of local elections. But we do the best we can do, and we're never going to get 100%. But I do believe that we're going to have to do something with the high school, and that it's not going to get any better. And we've applied, I believe it's 10 times, to the MSBA, and they don't think our high school is in bad enough shape, apparently. I don't know, maybe they're waiting for us to condemn the building or something, but we're going to have to continue to put Band-Aids on it for years to come, and the cost to replace it is not going to get any cheaper. On the population issue, I know that the building committee has had a number of analyses done on that, and that the school is based on what those professionals have said. I don't recall off the top of my head what the numbers are as far as population going forward, but I know that has been taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to comment?
Sure, it's unfortunate in a project of this size that at least the facts are not more bolted down and in common view, right? We will have different value judgments and opinions about priorities, and that's as it should be, and there's the vehicle of town meeting and various other forums to debate those. But we're still missing some facts. We're very late in this game, and there's not a cost on the table, except what one resident did as an analysis. There are still differing opinions about what the population studies mean. The state has a way of doing that, and our committees dismiss that as wrong and done their own. I don't know what the population forecast ought to be, but it seems to me there ought to be a bought into one that's served up as fact in front of the town on which to base these decisions. So that some of the facts and the key assumptions are still murky. It's tough to get to the value part. MSBA might also not like that we put everything on top of each other. It's not their fault we digging out a sins of the past with the pension obligation bond, but we had to. And now we've got West and a high school all stacked up. It's tough to do everything at once.
Laura, would you like to comment?
Well, first I'd like to add that this doing everything all at once is happening all over the state, because there was a boom in children in schools, and the 50-year plus time frame that those buildings are functional is coming to an end. That's part of the reason there's so much competition for the MSBA funding. And yes, we have been lucky enough to get funding from the MSBA for the Bancroft School, and now West L as well. Having said that, on the money issue, yes, that's true. We'll be receiving numbers next week. And the reason is because through this whole process, there have been a number of different options. And fairly recently, the committee narrowed it down to a renovation option and a new build option. And those are the two options we're getting the numbers on. Before that, there were, I think, 6 different options that were in play. So I'm looking forward to getting those numbers next week and the tax projections on what those mean. And it's premature in my mind to make the decisions before we have that information. It also would have been unnecessarily expensive to have done that work for 6 different plans.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the pre-prepared questions from the community. Does anybody in the audience have a question that they would like to address to the candidates of the Select Board? We have a question in the back. Mike, please.
I actually have several questions, but I'm happy to wait, do one at a time. So my name is Barbara Burke again. My first question, very simple one. Laura, you mentioned that you were a zoning board member. Where was that?
I was a zoning board member for 2.5 years in Reading before I moved here. I stepped down from the position when my oldest daughter was born.
And just to kind of continue the zoning theme, I'm just curious for both of you if the zoning amendment is passed at town meeting to create these MBTA districts and to be able to create this more housing, affordable housing. Would you be in favor of requiring the housing to be for sale, like ownership, rather than letting a developer come in to make them rental units, so we have more investment from the new residents being owners in town and having more of a stake in town?
It's an interesting question, because when we were looking at selling the Old Town Yard, one of the decisions that the Select Board had to make was whether to when we were putting the bid out, whether to allow for rental or only ownership. And there was a big push from a lot of people on the rental side, because there are a lot of seniors, empty nesters, those sorts of people who don't want the obligations of home ownership but want to stay in town. I was surprised by the information that we got on that, because my initial thoughts was that ownership would be better and would have people more invested in town. On the other hand, if it's a way to keep people in town that otherwise would move somewhere else by having rental units, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, because we don't want people to have to leave town if they don't want to continue with the obligations of having a single-family home.
Kevin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think I can see there's a need for both, and it might be a mixed solution. I don't know that we ought to choose to have it be all ownership or all rental, and probably there's going to be some market force in showing demand for both of those. The other part that I just don't know is what, if any, flexibility would the town have in prescribing that within the law? So that's something I would need to learn.
I would suggest that we have very little. With the Old Town Yard, we had control because it was our property that we were selling, and wanted some information from that. But, you know, if it's property that we don't own, I don't think we can limit it to sale or rental.
That'd be my expectation. I also think even in the case of the Old Town Yard, you ask a potential purchaser or developer for kind of what's their plan, and you favor one for whatever reason. But that's not to say in 5 or 10 years, once they own it, they can't convert the use of that so long it is within the zoning parameters of the town. So it might not be something that
It might not be static.
that we could hold static for a long period of time.
There was a question that I didn't ask that the community brought up, and since you all have referred to it a couple of times, what is happening with the town yard? What's going on with that?
I'm the I'm the representative of the select board in the negotiations with Minco. We're continuing those negotiations.
With who?
Minco, which is the company that was chosen as the developer. Their president is based in North Andover, so they're local, and they have bought up a number of properties around it, which is what we were hoping for, to get a real change in that whole area. And the select board at the last meeting extended the time to have the contract signed until May 1, and we suggested that we weren't going to extend it beyond that, so I believe we should have, hopefully, a signed contract before May 1st. There are a lot of things going on that are subject to executive session that I can't get into, but I think that we'll be moving forward shortly, and I look forward to seeing the finished product in the years to come.
Kevin, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. This topic, I know from hearing from many residents, is frustrating, right? This is a question about transparency, and I understand that some aspects of contract negotiations cannot be public, but when the whole premise for the project was that development should have started more or less a year ago, and property should be approaching time that it was contributing taxes, and that's not happened with just about zero explanation, except that we're continuing to negotiate with the developer. People wonder why. I've heard also the case made that if, when interviewing and considering proposals from the developers, all of them knew that it might be possible to take another year, let's say, or a longer period of time to start work, there may have been others put things forward that they didn't deem possible in the much shorter time period that was put out in the bidding process. So I think this is an area where the community is due more explanation. Again, I accept there's some line in the specifics of negotiation that might not be able to be disclosed, but zero information when this is way out of bounds relative to the timing expectation set doesn't seem correct to me. And I'm not in the executive session, so I don't know any more that I could say.
Laura, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to add two things. One, the pandemic happened in there, so a lot of things have been delayed. And two, there have also been the buyer, developer, has done some additional environmental testing, as you might imagine, since this property was used as the town yard for 100+ years. They wanted to make sure they knew what they had. So there were delays in doing that. I'm not sure what took so long, longer than was expected, but that information is in, and so everyone knows what they're dealing with, and we should be able to move forward. Well, we are moving forward now.
Kevin?
I think the bulk of this came after the most significant impacts of COVID, so it's difficult for me to understand why that would have been a big delay. And this wasn't a lot of humans packing into a small room kind of a project anyway. It's kind of open space. You can go stand out there, and certainly if you had a the design department, they could be working on it. The other part is I understood, and I'm sorry if I'm incorrect, but I understood that the town, prior to even taking the property to market, did already hire professionals to do an environmental assessment out of concern of what was there after all those years, and it got a clean bill of health from them. So I hope that something more serious doesn't come up, when I think there had been some effort to do that ahead of time.
I think that Minco wanted to do a little bit of their own due diligence, and my understanding is that they found very little that, we weren't already aware of. So I think things are good.
Other questions from the audience? Sure. Why don't you, do you have the mic? Why don't you go ahead, and then we'll come over here. Okay.
So
And
is-
your name again, please?
Yep, it's Barbara Burke.
I don't understand, I can't understand you.
Barbara Burke.
Barbara
There you
Burke?
go.
Okay, thank
I
you,
got the
Barbara.
mic. It's more directed at Kevin, but obviously curious what both of you would say. Kevin, you had mentioned that you are not in favor of increasing the debt limit, and you had mentioned obviously saving money in other areas. So I'm curious which areas you would propose to save money in, and how would you go about doing that?
I don't think it's kind of not the right of the select board to be into the operations. So I actually would defer to the town manager and to the school board and the school superintendent to do that. I think the select board is intended to be a policy body. It's designed to match directives to the town manager and the town staff to the expectations of the residents. And I would prefer to deal with that in a way that said to the town manager, in addition to producing the budget proposal that you have on the table today, could you not also produce a second one as an option for people to consider that was in a smaller tax increase envelope? And it would be the town manager and the professionals that run the different departments that could best surface what are the things that if we had to, we might give up some of. So I don't think it's the select board that ought to be in micromanaging line items and saying you don't need that truck and buy less of this and whatever. We have professionals running the departments that ought to do that. But from a policy side, I think it's fair game for the select board to say, perhaps we should bring to the townspeople a budget that grows this much instead of this much and has a tax impact of this instead of that. And at the end of the day, it will be decided at town meeting, as it should be.
Laura, would you like to address that question?
Yes, I agree in part with what Kevin said, that we have professionals, and the town manager is acting consistent with the goals that hopefully, with the goals the select board has set up for the town manager. But I also will say, over the years I've been on the board, that there have been a number of times where things have changed in the budget process because the select board was concerned about things. For example, we had a situation in the fire department where the ladder truck would go out, and not all the time, but a good portion of the time, there was not a second person on the truck. And that meant if somebody needed to run the ladder up there, there wasn't a person that could go up the ladder. And we were concerned about this as the select board, and asked the town manager to figure out how he could work within the budget to get that position covered full time. And we did get it done, and it was good for the protection of the community, and that was exactly responsive to what the board said. So yes, it is sort of big picture, but there are also things that come up along the way that we take responsibility for, and that's an important part of the select board's job.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to comment? Or are you good?
Covered it.
You good? Laura, you good?
Yep.
Ma'am, you had a question.
Yes.
And your name again, please.
Bonnie Zohore.
Hi, Bonnie.
So you both mentioned the high school as a very large future expense and a very important decision. So how involved have you been in the public forums that have been taking place? And can you share maybe an aha moment? I know when I was FinCom liaison to a previous committee looking at options for the high school, I had many aha moments where I learned about the inefficiency of the building, the issues that they have there. So maybe you can share what you've learned.
Laura, you're up.
Okay. I would say that I had my aha moment at my first parent-teacher or parents' night at the high school. And there are many fewer parents that are present at those events than there are students during a regular school day. Admittedly, we don't know where we're going, and the students do. But the chaos and the crowdedness involved when we were changing between classes and how all of us were late was my aha moment that this was not a good situation. That combined with the fact that you had rooms that were, 85 degrees and other rooms that were, 50 degrees. Not a good situation, and not one that fits with the way teachers are teaching and students can best learn today.
Kevin?
I've been to 2 of the different community forums, and I've additionally taken a tour of the high school when they offered that, and sat through a select board meeting where the school building committee presented as well. So in addition to reading everything that's been written, those are my sort of 4 in-person hearing from people. Again, there is no question that we need to make some improvements to the high school. There's just no question about that. But I had some aha moments that concerned me, and I'll just give you some examples. One is the very first school building committee I went to, and I said, roughly, what might this cost? And they said, we've not done any cost estimating yet, which may be factually true, but I can't comprehend that when undertaking a project of that magnitude, there wouldn't be some sketch budgeting for roughly what might it cost based on state experience building other high schools and cost escalation factors, for example, square footage estimates, for example, and I actually did some of them myself just to get a feeling. And a first pass idea of how might that fit into the town financials. The fact that either none of that was done or nobody would talk about it was an aha moment for me. A second one, again, stuff needs to be done in the high school, and there are plenty of examples of that. Laura just referenced a couple. But I also heard some things that made me wonder if we weren't unnecessarily gold-plating it. I heard how we needed an orchestra pit that at the touch of a button could raise and lower itself, rather than for the students that are involved to take a couple hours to manually reconfigure that on the occasions when it needed to be done. So there are some hard needs. There has to be reasonable temperature condition and whatnot. There are also some things maybe being baked in that I think if we were pressed hard financially, we might say might not be so critical.
Laura, would you like to respond?
No, I'm good, thank you.
You good? Kevin, are you good?
Yes, thank you.
That will conclude the section with the select board candidates and conclude our forum for the evening. So I'd really like to thank both of you for running and for serving the town, and that we wish you both good luck in your respective campaigns. I'd like to thank the folks from Andover TV for bringing us, pardon me? Oh, I forgot the closing. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mr. Durling. Gosh, I almost made it through without goofing up. Okay, and we have, Kevin, you're up first.
What's our timing on this? Sorry, please.
2 minutes.
Okay. As was observed, recent news
You
coverage.
can tell I'm in a hurry, so it's 2 minutes.
I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. My God, don't start the clock yet. As was discussed, recent news coverage and discussion with the town manager and the news suggested we're in danger of hitting a debt limit. We're at our credit card limit, or could be, if undertaking a project of that scale. And I think that guardrail is there for a reason, and we ought to respect it. I also want to suggest that our taxes are going up a lot faster than what people describe as a historical average. I have data from the town website in front of me. The last few years, 4.2%, 5.9%, 5.7%, and it will be higher next year. That's increase of the average residential single-family home taxes. And the historical average, if you go back 10, is 3.9%. And if you look at it in dollars, it's worse. The average dollars were $377, and recently we're over $600 increase amount year over year. So the taxes are accelerating. There can be no question about it, and we need to be more cautious with our spending and commitments with the common money, our taxes. We have high valuations and a good commercial base in this town, a large town. We don't have an income problem. We have a spending and a priority problem, and it's about asking good questions respectfully, putting some more tension in the planning, looking for smart development opportunities, both residential and commercial, but keeping us out of trouble and keeping the tax increases more manageable. You know, just because a home value goes up 10 or 20%, beyond the fact that that's not liquid money that we have in our pockets until we move, that doesn't mean that the cost of providing town services to that home have to go up at that rate too. We take the valuation, we multiply it by the tax rate and the levy limit, and we say, oh, the taxes can be this. It shouldn't be that because of the values go up, that goes directly through into taxes. And it doesn't go directly through, but a lot of it goes through. We have big decisions ahead. Again, the select board isn't to decide. The select board is to make sure people are informed and the town and the community expectations are matched. Thanks for your consideration, and I ask for your vote next Tuesday.
Thank you, Kevin. Laura?
First of all, I'd just like to point out that the amount that goes to taxation in this town is determined by town meeting. The only thing the select board does is determine the ratio of the portion that goes to residences, industrial, and commercial. That tax classification hearing happens every fall, and that's the role of the select board in determining taxation. Having said that, during my 2 terms on the select board, I've been involved in important decisions that improved our town and its financial health. Each of these projects, from the pension obligation bond to the construction of West L, was successful because a wide range of residents weighed in and town leadership listened to many voices as we improved our town together. Select board members do not have the luxury of focusing on only a few domains. Decisions require knowledge of tax levers, water and sewer rates, municipal finance, construction phasing, telecommunication laws, health insurance costs, state highway funding, zoning requirements, community needs and desires, legal obligations and limitations, and much more. The evidence I can handle the job in the future comes from looking at my past track record of diving into issues, learning quickly, listening actively, questioning wisely, and deciding collaboratively. Critical decisions will be made in the next 3 years to guide our town for decades to come. We need to provide Andover students with modern facilities, accelerate infrastructure upgrades, including water, explore development of improved recreational facilities, and bring the vision of the Old Town Yard to fruition. Success of these projects requires broad input from the Andover community. I'm committed to seeking out and listening to feedback from all constituents. I would like to continue this work and see completion of some current projects and ensure the continuing focus on sustainability and DEI. I ask for your vote to allow me to continue working towards a 7th year of consensus budgets and a 7th year of keeping the residential tax increases to no more than the 10-year average, while advancing important capital projects, addressing OPEB liabilities, and providing for the evolving needs of our residents. I come to the table with an open mind, not a personal agenda. I will continue to support collaboration. If reelected, I will continue to bring my experience as an attorney, a negotiator, a zoning board member, a parent, a homeowner, a taxpayer, and my knowledge of the many areas the select board has been involved in for the last 6 years. I humbly ask for your vote on March 28 and to continue working for our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Now we will conclude the political forum. And once again, I'd like to thank you for your willingness to serve. I'd like to thank everyone here who attended this evening, those who've joined us on Andover TV and social media. And please, next Tuesday, March 28th, get out and vote. Good night.